My name is Marissa Coyle. I'm 32 years old. Aunt Linda says it's just her little hobby, someone giggles. I don't say a word. I don't even blink. We're in the courtyard of the embassy compound in Warsaw, just before the awards reception. There are string lights overhead, delicate canapes passed on silver trays, and a white carpet leading toward the tinted stage. Linda's voice carries over the polite murmurs of the crowd, loud enough that two men near the press banner look up, loud enough that the military attaché holding a clipboard suddenly pauses mid-step. She makes these little inventions or whatever Linda says again louder this time, nodding toward me like I'm some niece who sells candles on Etsy. I turn to her slowly. Her wine glass tilts toward her mouth, but her eyes are watching me, calculating tight. My mother is beside her, silent, complicit. Across the lawn, a Polish officer, blue uniform, gold epaulets, stops walking. He sees my name tag. His eyes narrow, and then the interpreter at the podium freezes mid-sentence. I want to leave. I want to vanish into the marble steps or the velvet curtain or the clink of stemware around us. But I don't. I stand still, because I've learned that dignity has a shape and mine looks like silence. There's a flush creeping up the back of my neck. I feel the sting of humiliation like a slow heat under my collarbone. Not because of what she said I've heard worse, but because of the way everyone pretended not to hear, the way their gazes slid sideways and polite smiles tightened. 12 filings, 12 full international patents, and here I am, again someone's afterthought. Linda smirks like she's won something, as if reducing me makes her larger. I let my eyes drift beyond her, past the polished railings and rose-lined walkway, past the murmuring guests and distant musicians. I see the security detail shift at the edge of the fence. One of them, Tomasz, I think, meets my gaze. Just a flicker. He nods once so small it could be missed. He knows. But no one else does. Or maybe they do and they're choosing not to. A woman from the Department of Defense is walking toward me now. Crisp heels, tight bun. Her name is Sloane something. We met briefly in Berlin. She smiles with professional warmth. Dr. Coyle, she says, we'll begin in 10. I hear Linda snort behind me. Doctor, she echoes softly to no one in particular. Of course. I ignore her. I follow Sloane toward the edge of the courtyard, but I feel my aunt's stare on my back like a thorn pressed under skin. The stage is being adjusted. The flags of 3 countries flutter behind the podium, Poland's white and red, America's stars and stripes, NATO's blue wheel. Beneath them, 5 dignitaries speak quietly, surrounded by aides. I stand just off stage watching. A technician adjusts the microphone. He glances at the program list and stops at my name, then looks up. His brows lift barely and he nods at me. There it is again, that flicker, that undercurrent. Like the way the general in Berlin had stiffened when he heard my call sign. Or the time the algorithm security officer in Brussels had said quietly, "You're the one who built Sentinel-3." Those moments weren't accidents, and they weren't public. Because the people who truly understand the weight of things, they don't need fanfare. Back at the reception, I see Linda sipping her drink again. Laughing now, probably telling someone how I used to play with wires instead of dating. How I once made a sensor in my sock drawer. I let them, because this is the part they're good at, rewriting your story while smiling in your face. A man from the Polish ministry approaches me, older, distinguished. There's a line of medals on his chest. He pauses, scanning my badge. Then he leans to the officer beside him and whispers something in Polish. The aide's eyes widen, and for just a second the conversation around them halts. Not visibly, not theatrically, just pauses, like breath held, like a tremor before a wave. I stand straighter. I adjust my jacket. It doesn't matter that Linda called it a hobby, because I know what comes next. And this time, no one's going to look away. My name is Marissa Coyle. I'm 32 years old, and I've learned that in my family, silence is currency, and I've spent most of my life overpaying. I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. My dad, Gerald, taught high school civics. My mom, Elaine, ran the church's event board and made lace-tied cookie bags for every holiday. We were the kind of family that looked just right in Christmas cards, matching sweaters, matching smiles. But even in grade school, I knew I didn't match them. I didn't sing at the pageants. I didn't join the cheer team or decorate my locker with hearts. I was building a solar sensor in our basement by age 10, rerouting the current from an old garden light into a homemade weather balloon. My mother called it a phase. My Aunt Linda called it a boy thing. It didn't matter that I made the state science fair 3 years in a row. At dinner, they were more interested in my cousin Rachel's homecoming dress or my sister Ashley's latest crush. I used to sit there quietly still in my hoodie with metal shavings under my fingernails while they passed over me like a static blur. Eventually, I stopped trying to make them see. Linda always took the lead at family events. Big hair, louder voice, red lipstick like war paint. She once ran a kitchenware MLM and referred to herself as a regional executive, a phrase she adored. She had this way of looking at me sideways like I was a dust smear she hadn't quite wiped off the family mirror. "Oh, Marissa's still doing her tinkering," she'd say, even when I was already in grad school. "She's our little genius, aren't you, sweetie?" That word, genius, said like a joke. I never answered. I just nodded or smiled thinly. The less I said, the safer I stayed. They weren't cruel, not in the way you'd read in memoirs. It was softer than that, more invisible. 1,000 tiny exclusions. No invitations to Ashley's bridal shower. No congratulations when I quietly finished my second MS. The last time I was home for Thanksgiving, Aunt Linda cornered me in the kitchen and asked if I'd ever thought about settling down with a nice electrician. I was already consulting for Joint Cyber Command by then, but I just dried the dishes and said nothing. It wasn't just Linda. My mom, too, in her quieter way. She had this dream of Sunday brunches with her daughters trading recipe cards and baby advice. I never gave her that. I gave her a retinal scanner I designed for NATO applications. I thought she'd be proud. She blinked at the photo I sent, then replied, "Cool gadget. Will it help you meet someone?" followed by a smiley face. I stopped sending updates after that. I left Wisconsin for MIT when I was 21. 2 degrees, 1 classified fellowship, and 3 languages. Later, I was stationed for a time in Stuttgart, then The Hague, then Oslo. My name started to show up on internal white papers. I began earning patent protections, each more technical and unpronounceable than the last. Things related to encrypted drone behavior, thermal-guided decision trees, AI-leaning kinetic response systems. 12 filings so far. But to my family, I was still Marissa who builds things. That's what Linda told the neighbors. I once caught my uncle describing me as the smart one who never calls. They wanted a daughter who wore blush and posted baby shower selfies. I gave them blackout protocols and machine learning defense diagnostics. Wrong kind of brilliance, I guess. I came home twice last year. Once for my sister's baby shower, where I sat in a fold-out chair next to a pile of pink diapers while everyone politely ignored me. Linda asked if I was still flying to those computer things, then turned to my cousin and said, "You know, it's good she keeps busy." The other time was my mother's birthday. I arrived late flight delays from Brussels. She barely looked up when I handed her the framed article from the European Defense Journal. My name was on the byline next to a research analysis on disinformation payload mitigation. She smiled, nodded, then asked if I wanted leftover cake. I said no. I sat in my car for 20 minutes afterward, watching the house glow through the frosted windows. They were laughing inside. My dad had music playing. Someone was dancing in socks. I didn't cry. Not that night, but something in me quietly closed. Maybe that's the part I don't admit often. It's not the dismissal that hurts the most, it's the certainty they've always had that I would never really matter. Not in the way Ashley does. Not in the way Rachel does when she posts ultrasound updates with 10 comments from Linda under each one. They didn't just underestimate me. They deleted me. I learned to move in silence. My work spoke for itself in boardrooms I couldn't post pictures of. I stopped correcting people, stopped clarifying. Let them believe whatever made their world feel more familiar. Let them call it a hobby. Let them think it wasn't real. Because truth doesn't need their permission. And power doesn't need applause. I've spent years walking the edge between visibility and shadow. Now I'm being honored in Warsaw, not for my name, not for my face, but for what I've built in silence. And the people who know they know. The rest, well, they're still sipping champagne and chuckling with Aunt Linda. For now. The last time I went home for real, not just for appearances, was 2 years ago. Ashley had just given birth to her second daughter, and my mother insisted on a family lunch. I was already scheduled to fly to Ankara that week to consult with a cross-border communications team, but I rearranged everything, spent 9 hours rerouting through Frankfurt, landed at O'Hare in a snowstorm, drove the last leg myself. When I walked in, no one even looked up. They were in the dining room, streamers strung across the chandelier, Ashley's toddler bouncing in a booster seat, my dad carving a roast, Linda already on her second mimosa. Marissa Mom called from the kitchen, half-turning with a dish towel. "You're early. Sit. Help yourself." She didn't hug me. No one did. The table was full of stories about daycare drop-offs and diaper brands and the newest skin serum Rachel was using. I passed the carrots, said where I was supposed to, nodded when Ashley mentioned someone from her Pilates group. Then Linda turned to me, knife-poised midair. "You still doing that computer thing?" I blinked. "I am. She's working with some embassy," my mom added vaguely. "She's always flying somewhere." "Must be nice," Linda said, chewing. "All that free time." I glanced down at my hands. I'd been in charge of an entire simulation network just weeks earlier, one that handled rapid targeting decisions across 3 defense partners. There were fewer than a dozen people cleared for what I'd built. The last time I spoke, a room of 4-star brass had gone silent. And here I was, someone with too much free time. Later, after the cake, I tried to share something. Just one thing. A small update that one of my filings had been fast-tracked, selected for joint development under the Warsaw Accord. A huge milestone. Years of work. "Cool," my cousin muttered, scrolling on her phone. "So what does that mean?" I began to explain carefully, lightly, skipping the classified details just to the framework. How it might enhance secure coordination in multinational disaster response. Linda narrowed her eyes like I'd said something offensive. "We just use walkie-talkies at my job," she laughed. "Still work fine." Everyone chuckled. I stopped talking. That night, I sat in the guest room, the one with the old bunk beds from my childhood, and stared at the ceiling. My name had been submitted for a multinational commendation the week before, the kind that required 5 layers of vetting, including a background clearance at the national level. I thought of Linda's laugh, the way my mother had pretended not to hear. That was when I knew. They didn't want to understand. It got worse. 6 months later, my mom hosted her annual 4th of July picnic. I didn't want to go, but she left a voicemail. "It would mean a lot to your father. Everyone will be there." I flew in. It rained that day, so the party moved into the garage and living room. Someone spilled lemonade on my coat. I sat beside a tray of half-eaten hot dogs and listened to Ashley talk about her new home gym. My mother brought out a photo album at one point. Started showing guests Ashley's maternity portraits. Rachel's new fiancé. Then she flipped to a picture of me years old. I'm wearing glasses looking down at a circuit board. She smiled awkwardly. "That's from when Marissa used to build her little machines," she said. "She's always been good with gadgets." The man beside her nodded, polite, but blank. "She's very private about her job," my mom added. "We're not quite sure what she does." They all nodded like that made sense, like it meant nothing. That night I stood in the hallway outside the kitchen. I heard Linda in the dining room talking to a neighbor. She's smart but kind of, intense. Oh, yeah. Doesn't really get how to just be normal. All brains know real-world sense. There was a pause. "Anyway, Ashley's planning a beach trip. You should come." I stood there for 10 whole seconds. Then I turned and walked upstairs without a word. After that, I stopped visiting. No more birthdays, no more brunches, no more last-minute calls from my mother asking, "Can you just make an appearance?" You don't even have to stay long, because the truth was, I had made appearances. For years. And all they ever did was strip me down to something small and awkward and unlovable. They didn't just forget who I was. They erased me in front of myself. There was one moment I still can't shake. A week before the Warsaw event, I sent my mother an RSVP card with my name printed formally, Dr. Marissa Coyle, U.S. Innovation Attaché. No reply. Just a voicemail 3 days later. "Linda says you're getting some kind of recognition thing. That's nice. Be sure to wear something professional. I know you like your little jackets, but maybe add a necklace or something." A necklace. That was her only note. So when she and Linda arrived in Warsaw, uninvited, flown in by Rachel's husband, who worked for some logistics firm, I wasn't surprised. They showed up at the pre-reception already acting like they belonged. Linda even brought copies of her business card to pass around. She took one look at the printed agenda, saw my name on the final segment, and said with a laugh, "Wait, you're the main guest." She waved the card at my mom like it was a joke. Then she clinked her wine glass and said it. "It's just her little hobby. They took everything from me. Not my titles, not my work. No, those are intact. But the part of me that ever hoped they would see me, that's gone. They broke it slowly, with every word, every sigh, every shrug. And the part that hurts the most, I let them. For years, I let them. The morning after the pre-reception, I sat alone in my hotel room, the kind with marble counters and 2 phones. A bowl of polished green apples sat untouched on the desk. My dress uniform was still zipped in its travel case. Outside the window, Warsaw was soft with fog. You could hear the traffic beneath the mist, not loud, just the hum of a city in motion. I didn't move for an hour. Just sat there, robe pulled tight, knees up, staring at the ends of my hair where the light caught a fading copper thread. I kept thinking about that moment, Linda's voice, her tone, the way people had laughed. Just her little hobby. It echoed in my head like a bell in an empty church. I should have been reviewing my statement, making small changes to the final prototype demo, but I couldn't bring myself to open my laptop. Instead, I scrolled through my phone, mindless, looking for something to distract me from the cold that had curled under my ribs. Photos of the courtyard. A blurry picture someone had snapped of me near the reception tent. My own eyes looked unfamiliar, guarded, like someone trying not to flinch. Then I saw it, a candid photo from 2 years ago, saved in a folder called Mom's House. I was in the backyard, hunched over the portable drive I'd brought for a project that weekend. Ashley and Rachel are in the background, holding lemonade glasses mid-laugh. I wasn't even in focus. I looked like I didn't belong there, and maybe I never did. That morning, I almost didn't go. I typed out an email to the coordinator, "Apologies. Something has come up. I won't be able to attend." My finger hovered over the send button. There was a knock at the door. It was Tomasz, the same security officer I'd noticed the day before. He nodded respectfully, handing me an envelope hand-sealed. "From the minister's office," he said, then paused. "They requested I deliver it personally." He said nothing else, just left. Inside the envelope was a single folded page, elegant font, short message. "We are honored by your presence. Your contributions have already shaped the future. Your discretion humbles us. MD, no full name, just initials." But I knew who it was. And I just sat there holding the letter like it might shatter. That's what broke me, not Linda's insult, not my mother's silence. But that one letter, so brief, so formal, but real, proof that someone saw me, that I wasn't invisible in the spaces that mattered, and still I doubted. Because years of being overlooked doesn't vanish when someone hands you a compliment. It calcifies. It builds a voice inside you that's harder to silence than any ant with a wine glass. I closed the letter, laid it beside me. I stared at it for a long time, and I asked the question I never wanted to say out loud. What if they're right? What if all of it, the patents, the simulations, the rapid deployment interface I spent 3 years designing, didn't matter? What if it was just noise? What if no one remembered in 5 years? What if I'd spent my life perfecting systems that worked beautifully in silence, only to have my name disappear with them? I thought about walking out, changing my ticket, flying back under a different alias like I sometimes had to. No announcement, no presentation. Let someone else take the stage. Let Linda laugh about it later and say, "See, she's not made for this kind of thing." It would have been easier, so much easier, than standing up there while they watched, waiting to be misunderstood again. But then I remembered something small. Years ago, just after I filed my 3rd patent, I'd received an unsigned card in my agency mailbox. No message. Just a sketch on the front, an eagle gripping a lightning bolt. Inside one sentence, "Systems built in silence are harder to destroy." No one ever claimed it. No one had to. I kept it all these years. And I remember reading it again and again after every failure, every silence, every birthday where no one called. Systems built in silence are harder to destroy. That morning in Warsaw, I found the card again. It was tucked inside the back pocket of my travel folder, creased and worn. I held it in both hands, and something in me, something very small but unbreakable, said, "Get up." So I did. I stood. I unzipped my uniform. I combed my hair back into a clean, low twist. No lipstick, no necklace, no earrings, just the standard issue pin and the papers I'd written myself. I walked to the full-length mirror, not to adjust, just to see. And I said softly, "They'll never see you clearly, but that doesn't mean you're not here." And then I picked up the letter. And I left. They never saw what it cost me, what it still costs, to show up, to keep showing up. But I do, because the truth is, I almost believed them, and if I had, they wouldn't have even noticed I was gone. I arrived at the embassy compound earlier than required. The guards didn't stop me. They didn't need to. My name was already on the clearance sheet, but not under guest. It was printed beside the private coordination session that had taken place that morning with the minister's security team. 3 flags, 2 protocols, and 1 signature that unlocked access to a secure demo lab built beneath the marble. I entered without ceremony, no entourage, no badge beyond the small pin on my lapel matte black with an encrypted silver thread that shifted under light. They asked me to walk them through the final prototype, and I did. Quietly, precisely. No slides, no sales pitch. Just facts. Just systems. My system. The one I'd first imagined on a whiteboard in Oslo, scrawling notes in a language even my closest colleagues didn't fully grasp. A layered AI-integrated module that ran on fewer than 60 kilowatts and could recalibrate real-time signal integrity across borders without latency. It was elegant, not flashy, not loud, but perfect. And today, in Warsaw, it was being folded into something larger, something that wouldn't have my name on the headlines or maybe even the footnotes. But I would know, and they would know. "Can it withstand a zero-light fallback?" one of the Polish liaisons asked. I looked up, met his eyes. It already has, 3 times, once under duress, once under blackout, once in full simulation with kinetic interference. He blinked, then nodded. That was it. No applause, just understanding. I didn't need applause. When I walked back above ground, the sun had broken through. People were arriving now, suits, gowns, uniforms. Linda was near the edge of the stage talking animatedly to someone from the Department of Trade. I could see the flash of her red nails, the tilt of her head as she laughed. My mother stood beside her, smoothing the hem of her jacket, nodding occasionally. Her face looked tight-guarded like it always did when she was unsure whether she was supposed to be proud of me or confused by me. I didn't stop to greet them. I walked right past, toward the staff tent where they handed me my name card. It said, Dr. Marissa Coyle, United States Innovation Attaché below, that a tiny NATO insignia and a gold-embossed seal from the Polish Ministry of National Defense. Linda saw it. I know she did, because her laugh stuttered in her throat and her eyes followed me not with recognition, but with something quieter, confusion, then calculation. They didn't know what attaché meant. I didn't care. I made my way toward the staging area where Sloan, the liaison from Defense, gave me a clipboard. "We've adjusted the order," she said, eyes sharp. "Minister will speak first. You'll follow." "Understood." "And Dr. Coyle," she added. I turned. "Whatever happens out there, don't shrink." I nodded. Because she didn't say, "Make them see you." She said, "Don't shrink. That's a different kind of strength." Backstage, I reviewed the schematic one final time. Not the whole deck, just the core slide, the one showing the decision architecture flow I'd built. Each segment had been tested over 9,000 times. Not once had it failed. I had built it under silence in cold conference rooms and windowless data bunkers. During weekends, I should have been home. During holidays where I sat alone, every patent they ignored, every hour I was told I was too intense, every room I was left out of, I had used it, folded it into the machine. And now that machine would serve governments I couldn't name in public, because while they whispered behind their coffee cups, I was building the thing that kept their children safe. In the final 5 minutes before going on stage, I opened my travel case. Inside was a sealed envelope. Not the one from the minister, a different one, older, faded, stamped with the Defense Intelligence insignia. Inside it was the original letter that had started it all, a commendation unsigned but unmistakable. Back then it had been slipped under my door at the Brussels compound. It said only this: "You see the problem before they know it exists. Keep building. Quiet wins wars." I read it once, then folded it again, slipped it into my coat pocket, and stood. They never knew. Linda, my mother, my cousins, they never knew I had held the framework of tomorrow in my hands while they debated wedding centerpieces and exfoliants. They didn't need to, because power isn't a microphone. It's not a spotlight. It's the silence before a decision that changes everything. And that silence I had earned. As I stepped out toward the tented stage, the guests began to rise. I walked under the banner of 3 nations. My heels touched the white carpet without sound. My badge gleamed. Someone from the Joint Response Initiative nodded as I passed. Tomasz was at the perimeter again. He saluted not performatively, but quietly. A single motion, small, meant only for me. That was the moment I knew I was never powerless. I had just stopped trying to prove it to the wrong people. By the time the SUV turned onto our old gravel driveway, the conversation in the house had grown loud again. Uncle Ron was thumping the kitchen counter with his fist as he made another point about how real innovation doesn't come from people hiding behind technical paperwork. He chuckled at his own joke while Aunt Linda poured herself another glass of white wine and said, "The truth is, Marcy's just never been comfortable around people. All those awards and documents are nice, but she's always hiding behind them. You'll never lead anyone like that." I didn't say anything. I stood beside the window brushing crumbs from my lap. My fingers were still a little sticky from the gingerbread cake someone had made, and I found myself wiping them along a napkin just to stay busy. Then came the sound. Gravel shifting, brakes sighing, tires halting. My spine straightened. Someone else noticed, too. My cousin Shelley turned to the window and squinted. "Who's that?" The whole room paused. A slow silence settled. Even the kitchen faucet's drip seemed to hush. A dark SUV, matte black official-looking but without any markings, was idling outside. A man in full black stepped out first. His build alone was enough to command the room muscular, upright quiet. He opened the rear door with a crisp, practiced motion. Then the second man stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, subtle but not ordinary. Even through the window pane, you could feel the stillness around him, the kind of hush that follows someone used to being obeyed. I walked to the door. Before anyone could stop me, I opened it and stepped onto the porch. The suited man removed his gloves slowly, his gaze fixed on mine. Then he nodded. "Miss Marceline Adler?" he asked, voice deep, precise, and faintly accented. "Yes." He stepped forward. "I'm here on behalf of Minister Bialek. He extends a formal invitation for you to join tomorrow morning's closed-door session on defense technology convergence. Your files," he held out a black portfolio, "have prompted a national review. He requests your insight personally." Behind me, the door creaked open. I didn't look back, but I could hear Aunt Linda's wine glass clink as it was set down too fast. The man in black, still standing by the SUV, suddenly lifted his right hand and tapped his earpiece. A short pause, then he turned his head toward the porch. "Minister arriving." 30 seconds. My chest tightened. No, they didn't, but they had. A second vehicle, sleek armored diplomatic plates, came into view, escorted by 2 quiet motorcycles that turned down a separate path flanking the driveway. The vehicle rolled forward in absolute silence until it stopped in front of the house. The suited man straightened, and the car door opened. Out stepped a woman in a formal navy coat with polished buttons and a small white badge on the collar. No entourage, no press. Just her. Minister Agnieszka Bialek, Poland's current Minister of Defense. I had only seen her in photos, speaking before NATO, debating with generals, touring new energy diffusion labs in Krakow. She was never theatrical, never warm, but always composed with a weight of seriousness that made people stop mid-sentence. She walked up the porch stairs like she had climbed palaces slower. Then she stopped in front of me and bowed. Not a nod, not a political dip of the chin. She bowed. When she straightened, her voice was so even I thought I imagined her words. "Miss Adler, we are late in recognizing your frameworks. But we are listening now." My hand had instinctively gripped the edge of my shirt. I barely remembered to breathe. Behind me, someone gasped audibly. Minister Bialek glanced past me into the house and then returned her attention to my face. "You've designed stabilization models our joint task force has not seen replicated. Your dual fluid converter theory has applications far beyond energy. We've already begun recalculating deployment feasibility." I wasn't aware it had reached your office," I said, finally finding my voice. She simply replied, "We read what others dismissed, and then come." I hesitated. "Now." She gave me a small smile, barely visible but there. "You've waited long enough." I turned to grab my coat. And that's when I saw them all. Every single one of them. Aunt Linda standing by the kitchen, her arms limp at her sides, her mouth slightly open but no sound. Her wine glass now on the counter forgotten. Uncle Ron stiff, his usual booming voice nowhere to be found. Cousin Shelley staring straight at the minister like she was trying to reconcile two worlds colliding. I didn't say anything. No explanation, no goodbye. I simply nodded once and walked out the front door behind Minister Bialek. The suited man handed me the black portfolio. The bodyguard pulled the SUV door open with military precision. I slid in. Inside, the vehicle smelled like cedar and old leather. I looked back once just for a second and saw my entire family framed in the porch doorway, silent, shaken. They stood, and I rode away. I didn't even hear the doors open. I just felt the stillness. That eerie kind of quiet that drops when the temperature in a room shifts, when people go from mocking to uncertain, then to afraid. Aunt Linda's words froze mid-air. Her perfectly lacquered mouth still hung open, her voice cut short, as if someone had snatched the sound from her throat. That's when I turned. The Minister of Defense of Poland wasn't someone I expected to see in our Virginia family gathering. But there he stood tall, composed, his navy coat crisp with golden embroidery flanked by two quiet aides. He took one look at me, then he walked. Not to my uncle. Not to my cousin Danica still holding her champagne like it gave her status. Not to Aunt Linda, whose face had gone a shade somewhere between powdered sugar and ash. He walked straight toward me, and the sound of his shoes on the hardwood was the only thing anyone could hear. Then he did something no one at that party would forget. He stopped 3 feet from me, looked me in the eye, and bowed. Not a stiff nod, not a casual Western gesture. A full, deliberate, old-world bow of respect, head dipped, hand to chest, weight shifted. "A pleasure to meet you in person, Miss Sutherland," he said in crisp English. "Our engineers still speak your name." Danica dropped her champagne. The crystal shattered against the floor like punctuation. I didn't move. I couldn't. The Minister of Defense rose from the bow. He turned slightly toward the room and added, "We never refer to her patents as a hobby. In Warsaw, we call them infrastructure. You could have dropped a feather and heard it land." Aunt Linda's mouth had closed, but her eyes were wide, flickering. She tried to smile, but it came out crooked. The minister looked at me again as if confirming something. Then he offered his hand. "I was instructed to deliver this in person," he said. From the inside of his coat, he pulled a slim folder with a red wax seal. I took it. My fingers trembled slightly. Inside was a formal invitation, an official request for me to consult on a bilateral initiative involving AI systems in defense logistics. Not theoretical, not hypothetical. Execution stage. The words were simple, but they might as well have been written in fire. Danica stepped back. She nearly tripped over her heels. Someone whispered, "Wait, she's that Sutherland." The minister turned to leave, but not before glancing at Aunt Linda. His gaze held her in place like iron. Next time, he said, speak with more care. Some minds build what armies depend on. Then he walked out. And I stood there, silent still, but unshaken. It wasn't vindication that washed over me. It wasn't pride. It was something quieter, something fuller. Clarity. For years, I thought I needed their approval to feel seen. I thought I had to make myself small so they wouldn't accuse me of being too much. But in that moment, I saw them for what they were. People scared of what they couldn't control. And me, I was no longer asking for permission to matter. I nodded quietly and walked past them, past the dropped champagne, past the frozen laughter, past the relatives who suddenly forgot their snide remarks. Outside, the SUV waited. The Polish aide opened the door, but I paused on the steps. Aunt Linda had followed me. Her heels clicked behind me, fast, now nervous. "Geneva," she said, breathless. I didn't realize." "You didn't want to realize," I said, turning only slightly. "That's different." She blinked. "It was just a joke. You know how we tease in this family." I smiled, not unkindly, just tired. "No. You tease people you respect. You mocked what you feared." Then I stepped into the SUV. The door shut with a soft click, and as we pulled away, I saw at the exact second Aunt Linda's expression changed. From pride to shame. She finally understood. I wasn't the girl with quirky patents. I was the woman nations consulted. I didn't look back again. Warsaw in February is cold, but it didn't bother me. The conference hall was lined with military officials and systems architects from around the world, and on the podium just before I was introduced, I saw something that stayed with me. A line on the agenda read, "Keynote Consultant Ms. Geneva Sutherland, Lead Civilian Architect, Joint Defense Infrastructure. No degrees listed, no qualifiers, just my name." They didn't need proof. They already knew. I stepped onto that stage not as someone who finally made it, but as someone who'd been here all along, just unseen by the people too blind to look. And in the back of my mind, I thought, let them mock, let them laugh, because one day, they stand, they freeze, and I won't even need to speak.